we could probably talk for 2.5 or 3 hours on how to assemble the team of the architect, the contractor. Do you go design build? Do you go traditional design bid build? But we don't have that much time because first off, Brad took us to Canada, so we lost a few minutes out of that trip. But anyway, we will do our best and frankly try to hold some time at the end of our presentation for discussion and questions from the audience. So if we were in this room 3 decades or more ago, it would be pretty simple as to how to build a church. Your building committee would go out and hire an architect, likely somebody that does, in this case, United Methodist churches. This is the church that I grew up in the Northern Neck. And yes, there's a town called Lively, Virginia. And no, it's not very lively, but it's there. This church was built in the 1960s. Building committee went out, found an architect in Richmond that did Methodist churches. I've been in half a dozen Methodist churches that look a lot like this one does. And it's kind of the pattern that was done back then. Once the architect does the design, they put it out for competitive bids, what we call design bid build in the industry. It's also known as hard bid or competitive bid process. It's pretty simple. You hire the architect, they do the design, the working drawings, and you go out to the market. Maybe it's 3 contractors that you know that are close by, as was the case with the contractor that built this church. He was a hometown guy, built some very nice houses and built a great church in the 1960s. That process has been around for 100 years. It's tested. People understand it. Typically with the building committee, they are very comfortable with this process. What we'd like to talk to you about is a couple of other processes that you might want to get comfortable with as well. In the early 1990s, design build came out. DBIA, Design Build Institute of America. I actually currently serve as the Hampton Roads chapter president of that organization. It is becoming a very popular delivery process. As Emmanuel, when he was introducing Brad, the firm that Brad went to work with before he came here was a design build firm. They were both architect and contractor. More often than not, it's a process where you hire the general contractor, and then the general contractor will hire the architect and all the engineering team. It is described as a turnkey delivery to the owner with a guaranteed cost, and in parentheses I say, or implied, because when you're hiring that team at the very beginning, all of the conversation that Brad took you through with the master planning and design really hasn't been done. So if a contractor says, I can do your building addition fellowship hall for $3 million, he's giving you that guarantee, but you don't know what's in the $3 million. It has to be determined. All the decisions that the building committee and the congregation need to go through have not been done yet. So it's a little bit of a challenge, frankly, for church projects to go through that pure design build process. The one benefit of this is that the risk for cost is generally transferred from the church to the contractor. The contractor says, I'll build it for $3 million. He takes responsibility, or she takes responsibility for that, again, with some caveats. But that concern of design bid build, where you don't know what the cost is until it's all bid, generally gets pushed to the contractor. This is becoming a very popular method of delivery. It's anywhere from 45 to 50% of the work that's out there right now. And it's one of several collaborative project delivery processes that we see in use today. Another of those collaborative process deliveries, and by that I mean that you have the 3 parties working together around the table during the design and during construction. So collaboration between the church, between the architect and the rest of the design team, and between the contractor that is going to be constructing the building. The contractor's at the table with all of us while we're doing the design. The church goes out and hires an architect, just like you do in the traditional method that's been going on for 100 years. The architect leads the design team, which includes all of those engineering consultants that Brad mentioned, mechanical for the HVAC, plumbing, electrical, structural, civil for your site plan. The general contractor comes on board And the contractor, during the design, leads the estimating process, project management, and then ultimately, when it goes under construction, they lead the superintendent, subcontractors, and suppliers. The nice thing about this is that three-legged stool, or what I show here is an equilateral triangle of quality, time, and cost, are fully explored and fully understood by the church committee and the design and construction committee. You always hear that, hey, and we've had clients come to us, and clients come to David Nice and Henderson that say, all right, I want the highest quality, I want it done fast, and I want to pay a cheap dollar amount for it, right? That doesn't work. You've got to have balance between those. Everybody said, yes, exactly. What's your point? The other thing is it's open book negotiation. That is that the contractor's fees, the architect's fees are fully disclosed, the cost of construction. This is an emerging type of delivery method. As you can see here in the early 2000s, less than 5% of projects were delivered this way. It has come along a lot in the last 20 years or so. And you see about a fifth to a quarter of owners saying they are looking at this method today or using it actively. So let me drill down into design, bid, build, just so we understand the difference between these methods. Again, with design, bid, build, church hires the architect. The architect goes through the entire design, construction documents. He puts an invitation for competitive bids out on the street. You might have 3 or 4 or 10 contractors that are interested in looking at it, and the project is awarded competitively to the lowest responsive bidder. So do you know you're getting the cheapest price on bid day, except for change orders? Yes, you do. You know what that number is. But the decision to hire the contractor is they're on a pre-qualified list, perhaps, hopefully they are, but it's the person or the company that's giving you the lowest dollar amount on bid day. It's got the benefit of 3-part contractual relationship. That is, the architect works for you as the church, the contractor works for you as the church. And we kind of checks and balances with each other. The challenge is the architect that you hire has to rely on past experience. What did my last 3 church projects cost? What do these fellowship hall expansions cost? Or the state of the bidding climate. And frankly, since the pandemic, the state of the bidding climate has been a little unpredictable. So it's difficult for the architect to really know what the cost is. And remember, contractor doesn't come in until all the drawings are done and complete. The architect's going to provide cost estimates in-house or an outside consultant. And then the contractor really has 3 to 4 weeks to fully understand the project. And if you've been in the seats with either of these guys and other contractors in the room, on bid day, it is crazy. You basically are compiling all these numbers. You're trying to compare this electrical number to that one. I got one 50% high. Is that one right or wrong? It's a crazy process. So it is a challenging process to have the contractor really fully understand the scope and give you a good number on bid day. Graphically, how does that work? The green and blue, or the architect that's working for probably 3 to 4 months at minimum, could be up to a year depending on the size and the complexity of the project and how fast the church wants to move, as Brad described. And then you put it out for bids, and that's on bid day is when you learn what the number is. So as I said, the architect has done all of his work or their work. It's challenging, it's frustrating for owners because you got to go back and redesign if the project comes in over budget. So is this process does it still make sense for certain projects? Absolutely. You know, churches, the buildings and facilities go through their own life, if you will. You've got to change flooring materials out. You need to repaint the interior. Roof needs to be replaced. If it's that simple of a project, you don't need to go through a complex process. You find 3 contractors that are good quality roofing replacement folks. You ask them to put a number on it, and you award to the lowest bidder. So again, as long as you go through that pre-qualified process, that works for you for simple projects. Flip it to Al.
Well, thank you, Tom. And Tom did an amazing job of just defining the three most popular vehicles, as I would call them, for onboarding the construction manager. And thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm going to take a few minutes and take a little bit deeper dive into the construction manager at risk and design, build, delivery methods. I'm going to first focus on the construction manager at risk because in our industry, in our experience, it is by far the most prevalent vehicle for onboarding a general contractor / construction manager, particularly for church groups. In our experience, and as Emmanuel mentioned, I've been with Henderson 20 some odd years now, and I think we've only had one design build church project out of dozens and dozens of other church projects through a more collaborative approach such as construction manager at risk. One other thing I just want to point out, in our industry, there's nothing that stays the same, right? So you may hear me refer to construction manager at risk as CMaR, or sometimes we shorten it and just call it CMaR, right? So if I say CMaR, that's what we're talking about. And again, Tom's done a really nice job of just describing the practicalities and things of that nature of some of these major things. I'm just going to, from a contractor or from our perspective, offer some pros and cons for each one. And I'd like to start off on the construction manager at risk, talking about more theoretical aspects of it, the spirit of a construction manager. And I'm going to, when I say these things, I'm sort of contrasting it to the design, bid, build, delivery method, of which Tom just took a deeper dive into. The spirit of construction manager at risk is very much more collaborative. Again, the construction manager is onboarded very early on, at the very onset of the vision and or the very onset of the design process. The major responsibilities, and there's a wide variety of responsibilities a construction manager can provide to a project, but as a team member, a central team member, the primary responsibility for the CMaR is to establish and manage cost and schedules. Those are the two things that get out of control on most construction projects. Things do not want to go down, they want to go up, and they need to be controlled. And that's where we find ourselves is really in control of those two things predominantly. One other thing to think about, when I talk about the spirit of a CMaR project, the architect, the owner, traditionally have had a very close relationship. The contractor, through design, bid, build, is almost on the outside to some extent. Mm-hmm. And it's not unheard of for a contractor to even have, to some extent, a confrontational relationship with the owner and the contractor. CMaR is 100% different. The construction manager is brought on as a team member, and the illustration that we have up here, I think, illustrates that pretty well, right? There's no starting and stopping to that relationship. With that, I believe just the spirit of collaboration, the construction manager, the architect, and the owner all have a central goal in mind, and it's a successful completion of the project, right? Risk is balanced accordingly, so no one individual or no one company has to feel protective of themselves. I'd like to talk a few minutes about some pros and cons of the CMaR process. Speed. There's multiple ways that a construction manager at risk project can be expedited. And if in some cases, projects that can be a priority, right? I think Tom mentioned a few minutes ago, we want it excellent quality, we want it fast, we want it cheap, right? Well, the CMaR delivery method can actually help with that. It's not unheard of and fairly common to actually start construction while design is still being finished, right? Again, you've got the contractor on board as a team member, right? We're not waiting until the very end of design to onboard the contractor like we do in design bid build. So it's also not uncommon in our industry for the civil design to be well established and well out in front of completion of the building design, which makes perfect sense because permitting with the local jurisdictions follow, right? So the civil design is complete, it's in for permitting. We oftentimes have the ability to start the civil work well before the building work. in this delivery method, we can actually do that. And furthermore, depending on the urgency of the project, we can even fast track, say, for instance, the foundation systems, right? Actually start the foundation systems before the complete design and permitting of the overall church. The code compliance will allow that. So if that is an aspect to any project that you're considering, that's a real attribute. Certainty. Again, I think Tom did a nice job of describing that design, bid, build, delivery method, right? So on bid day, we get the number, we give it to the owner, and what happens? Sometimes it's a surprise, right? Sometimes the project is over budget. What do you do then, right? That is not certainty. That's a problem. The CMaR delivery method really eliminates that. The budget is established very early up front. It is a constant focus throughout the design process, right? There are ebbs and flows to design based on the ebbs and flows of the associated costs, right? The architect, the owner, and the design team work together to make sure that the design is on par with the budget. Same for schedule, right? So again, the construction manager's primary responsibilities is control cost and schedule. Schedule is the same aspect as far as certainty goes. The schedule is established well up front. Things, a lot of times we'll see or find surprises in the civil construction, underground utilities that weren't expected, so on and so forth. The construction manager's responsibility during design is to find and eliminate those obstructions, not just underground utilities, but pretty much anything that would prohibit us from starting construction when we say we're going to start. So if certainty is important to you, you should consider this delivery method. Risk mitigation. So probably like with any other business, there is risk involved with construction, risk along with development. This particular delivery method does a really nice job of diversifying the risk to all parties involved, right? Unlike some others where, and I'll go back to the design bid build, where the contractor maybe has a month or two to actually plan the project, right? You think that there's some risk that goes along with constructing a project for 16 to 18 months and they only had 4 to 6 weeks to plan for that? Yeah, there's a lot of risk there. Therefore, it's baked into that contractor's cost proposal and they may be even trying to shed some of that risk as they move forward with construction. One other thing that I will mention is the church is much more informed. Through this delivery method, again, you've got the sort of the three-legged stool, the architect, the owner, and the contractor. The contractor's job is to inform, to bring industry-related information to that project team. Popular subjects, maybe popular is not the right word, but prevalent subjects these days, inflation, right? Over the last 5 years, we've all experienced that. Our industry is no different. It's crazy what things cost these days. More specifically, here recently, with tariffs, right, how they affect the construction industry. More here recently, fuel prices, the surcharges on deliveries and things of that nature. That's our job, is to bring that sort of information to our design and owner teams so we can navigate through those things together. Let me just touch on a few cons, or I wouldn't even call them cons at this point. I would call them questions that maybe the church should have when thinking about engaging this delivery method. Will the church pay more money? Right? It's a good question. So you're not out competitively bidding your general contractor or construction manager, the traditional method. Does that mean you pay more money? No, not necessarily. Something to think about, right? So anywhere between 10 and 15% is the direct cost related to a construction manager / general contractor. Okay, that's the cost. That's their general conditions. That's their fees, so on and so forth. That's all borne by them. So thinking about it from the opposite perspective, 90 to 85% is subcontractor work. That's where we hire other entities to actually do the work. That's our business, right? So when you think about, hey, am I being treated fairly by the construction manager by negotiating with them, by bringing them on board early? Think about that ratio, right? So you really want to be thinking about, I need to select the right team that's going to help me manage that 90% of the cost, not the 10% of the cost, if that makes sense. And furthermore, traditionally, the construction manager onboarded early on through some sort of competitive nature, like RFPs, requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, and it's very, and GuernseyTingle does a really nice job of creating those RFPs for contractors like Jeremy and I to respond to, and traditionally, there's cost associated with that. We put our fees on the table up front, so you know what they are, and we can plan for those things. One other question that you may have is, am I locked into this, right? So I just put together a team. We've got 6, 8, 10, 12 months of development work to do. What if my team, through the best efforts of vetting, but what if my team isn't doing their job? Well, I'm gonna put a pause on that, okay? A little bit of a cliffhanger, because we're gonna address that specifically in a later slide. I spent a lot of time on construction manager at risk. Emmanuel's probably wanting to get the hook to pull me off, but I'm going to spend just a few more minutes on the design build process. And again, it is a prevalent in our industry. I would say at least, if not more than half of our work this year is through the design build delivery method, although it has not been, again, popular is not the right word, for our experience with churches, and there's probably good reason for that. Again, touching on this one rather quickly, but the pros that I mentioned for construction manager at risk, speed, certainty, risk management, and keeping the church informed, they all apply here. Everything, for the most part, applies. Some of the differences may be the collaborative nature. Design build is like pretty much everything else. It can be done in multiple forms in multiple ways. You can have a design build project where the owner is practically not involved at all. They establish their criteria up front. The design builder goes off, does the design, brings and starts construction. That's an extreme. Or we also have projects where the owner is very involved with the project. But for the most part, there's just a slight bit of difference in that collaborative approach between construction manager at risk and design build. Design build, it's questionable. Is it more expensive, right? A lot of times design build projects are larger in nature. That often leads to the need to have more people involved. It's not unheard of and fairly predominant that a owner will hire an owner representative for a design build project. The design build, from a contractual standpoint, a little bit more, maybe a lot more complicated. So it's good for that owner to have representation that understands the construction industry when we're doing design build work. I'll be happy to answer any more questions about those things, but I'm going to turn it back over to Tom.
Thanks, Al. GuernseyTingle has been doing this work for a long time. Started in 1996. There's a guy raising his hand in the back of the room. I won't give you his name, but his initials are Pete Henderson, and I worked on one for Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And it really changed the way that I think both of the firms, and then David Nice Builders soon after that, think about our own business and how we do things. So, Al mentioned an adversarial relationship, a confrontational relationship. How many projects have any of us been through in our life that look like this? There's a problem, there's finger pointing, the poor owner, says, solve my problems, keep my project going. And frankly, this process has helped GuernseyTingle change the way we do business. No longer are our project managers and our architects trying to protect the owner from the big bad contractor that's going to charge change orders. We're all trying to solve problems for the client. Let's talk a little bit about the architect selection. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy to talk about the contractor selection process. So when you hire an architect in a CMaR, or construction management at risk, it's pretty much the same as a traditional design bid build. You're going to go out to a group of recommended architects, either folks that have done other churches in your neighborhood, folks that you've got recommendations for, maybe folks that some of your congregation knows. Select 3 or 4, good number to start with. Everybody's serious about submitting for the project. They provide their qualifications and approach. One aspect that is a little different here is you need to make sure that you're talking to architects that understand collaboration and team. Some of my colleagues, and architects are known for having big egos. I didn't say that, did I? Some of my colleagues are still trying to control that process. They don't like the contractor coming in during design and saying, hey, Mr. Church owner, I've got a better way of doing this that might be faster, less expensive, better products. That's hard to give up that control. So I always advise nonprofits and churches, make sure that you ask those questions about how do you feel about having the contractor at the table at the same time you're doing the design. It's extremely important. The other thing that I recommend is that process that Brad talked about, the master planning, the building condition surveys, once you shortlist your architects and say, okay, give me a fee for X, we still see a lot of RFPs from churches that say, I want a fee for the master planning, all the design, construction documents, I want to see you out at the job site once every 2 weeks. Give me a fee for all of that. You do not need to make that commitment up front. You don't need to spend that money. Brad dangerously threw out a number of how much it costs for a master plan, but that's the kind of number that you need to commit early on. If this is I'm going to pick a number, if this is a $4 or $5 million project that you're doing, you will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in architectural and engineering fees. Do not go spending that money too soon, because that master plan and even the schematic design could very well change the direction of the project. You may think it's going to be a new build, and we might find out, hey, we can expand that existing building much more effectively and get what you're looking for. So don't make the commitment that you don't need to pass the first steps in the process.
One thing just to tag on what Tom said is that, and Al had mentioned earlier, our industry is shifting to this more collaborative delivery type process. And these are kind of become almost buzzwords with design, build, CMaR, different aspects like that. But it's really important to, when you're selecting your architect, when you're selecting your general contractor, that they actually have experience producing in that, because everybody's an expert and everybody's done it until they've actually done it, right? And it's not just the contract language we're worried about. It's actually, as Al mentioned, the spirit of the agreement and everybody pulling the same direction. And so that begins with your first team member that you bring on, and then also the second team member, which is a general contractor. So we've got a couple minutes left. We're going to get into down some of the nitty-gritty details. So we'll do our best to keep it moving. I'm sure none of the preachers in here have closed 3 times and then snuck a little preaching into the closing prayer, so you'll know where I'm coming from. There's a lot of truth today, huh? Well, we'll keep it brief. So again, this is a little bit different from your typical process where we're just hard bidding and getting a hard number. And a lot of times the insider knowledge is sometimes it's whoever made the worst mistake on bid day gets the job. Sometimes it could be 0.001% difference in costs, and it's just, whoever dropped the pencil or whatever the case may be. But this process, we're actually not just the cost, but our experience and what we bring to the table. That's what you guys are looking for. So the architect will put out a request for proposal, which is typically called an RFP, and 3 to 5 is pretty standard. And just to be honest, you don't want more than 5 because it discourages companies like ours from participating. So we want to know the time and effort that we put into getting a proposal together is going to give us a good return on an investment. In a backhanded way, tells us you're not really informed on the process, because you put that many numbers out, you're looking for a price, not a relationship. So the architect that you first bring on board will help you and give you qualified general contractors to pursue, and from there we start whittling it down. This whole thing kind of culminates in an interview process. It may start with 5, but you may work through the proposal and then decide, hey, we're only going to land on these 2 to bring in for interviews. And this is, again, this is where we make our case to you on why we're a right fit for the project, because we are, it's going to be a long-term relationship. So one of the first things that we want you guys to understand is, and Al really hit on this, that we're initially not pricing out the whole project. We're pricing out our fee, which is considered like overhead, profit, and general conditions. General conditions are things that we can control from the beginning, things that we know every project needs: site supervision, temporary power, all these kind of things that we know are direct costs to the project that we can control, and therefore we can accurately price. So again, it's early on in the design, so we only have that small picture to work with. I like to make the analogy of, the 1,000-piece puzzle. You open up the box, you dump it on the table, you just got a pile, right? Where do we start with this thing? So first thing you do, you're looking at the cover of the box, and then you're finding the corners, getting those in place, and you're building the edges. And that's kind of what this RFP process is about. It's giving us a framework that we can get a good idea of where the project is and where it's going. In our industry, this kind of translates to these different items up here. Just general descriptions of the building materials and the systems that are going to be involved. There'll be early schematic drawings from the architect included, just to give general idea of the size and scope. The estimated project schedule, project budget, and then typically in specification form, but really a hard description of what's expected from us as general contractors at the very beginning through construction, and then also at the construction phase. And that gives us a good idea of how we can price it, that initial piece. And so, again, this is baked into this process, that we're pricing what's known and what we can control. The actual cost of the work, we can go ahead to the next slide. I'm going warp speed on him, so. The actual cost of the work will be competitively bid out as we go. What slide are we on now? No, I told you I'm moving. I moved you ahead too fast.
Oh, sorry.
Let's go to 17. So there's two parts to this. Again, one is the fee and one is the qualifications and job approach. So this is typically
What, 18?
Yeah, 18, sorry.
Yep, pretty good.
So we'll walk you through, when we have the interview, we walk you through the specific team we want to bring on board, how we manage the contracts, other projects we've done in the past with references. So these are all very important, as we get to know each other. And this interview is a two-way conversation. We're getting to know you, you're getting to know us. We're making sure our values align around communication, transparency, problem solving. This process is collaborative, and we're going to be working together for a while. So we want to make sure it's a right fit from the beginning. We want to find that out off the bat and not 6 months into the construction and back to that cartoon of everybody pointing at each other, right? So some of our specific pre-construction responsibilities, once we start construction, once you guys bring us on board for pre-construction, then we're hitting the ground running. As Al mentioned before, we're diving in, we're part of the team, we're part of the process. A big part of that is, as Al mentioned, controlling the budget. We do that through ongoing estimates. Very early on, that's going to be in-house estimates. We're based on historical data and industry trends. And as we go further on, we'll start engaging maybe some major subcontractors, such as your steel and mechanical, electrical, and get real-time budgets from them. But then once the design is complete, we'll actually go out to competitive bid for the remainder of the trades, and then that's how we get hard pricing. And it goes beyond that. It's constructability reviews. If something is not going to build the way that it's drawn on paper, we're going to have that, bring it to the team and have that conversation right then. we're not typically under the design bid build, we don't find that out until we're already on site in construction, and then we have a problem, right? It's expensive and it impacts the schedule. So beyond constructability, we're also develop the schedule, like Al mentioned, and we'll address long lead items. In this current climate, between COVID and tariffs and just the uncertainty we're living in, certain items have to be ordered well ahead of time. They're actually needed in the field, but we can identify those during design and get out in front of that to maintain our schedule. So I guess in summary, the pre-construction phase is where we earn your trust as general contractors. We're working through everything with you. By the time we break ground, you should feel completely confident that we know your project inside and out, and that we're able to deliver on it the right way.
And if it doesn't happen that way, what happens, Al?
Well, a few moments ago, when we were taking the deeper dive into the CMaR delivery method, I posed a question, right? The what if. What if the church isn't happy, right? What if the process isn't going well? What if one of those 3 key team members isn't living up to their commitment? This is the answer, right? And I love the illustration. It's an off-ramp, right? That's literally what we call it in our industry. Now, that off-ramp should definitely come in the form of a contractual clause in your agreement, specifically with the construction manager, but maybe even with the designer as well. And what that does is it always keeps the owner, the church in this case, in control, right? You are the client, you get to make the calls. So whether it's early on in the development process or whether it's later in the development process, you have the ability to exercise this off-ramp. That could be I know Jeremy or myself have this experience, but I'm sure some others have. But we've never been in the position to where we exited a project early, right? But we know that it happens. We know that this is a good vehicle to have it on the owner's behalf. And ultimately, although you may lose a team member, you retain the documents, right? Again, it's a contractual obligation that you can take those documents in whatever form they may be, whatever condition they may be in as far as completeness, and take them and do as you please with them. You can halt the project, you can move forward, you can go design bid build at that point. It's really up to you. So as you take that venture into your next project, think about making sure you have this as a clause in your contract.
So quick summary of why this process. Obviously, we believe in it. It is open book, which we think is one of the best approaches, and collaboration of the church, the design team, the contractor around the table. The second bullet there says it builds trust and confidence. I did, in the last couple of years, we did a debrief after a CMaR project. And I had the owner's rep there. And the owner's rep told the folks in the room, he said, at the end of this process, the team builds a lot of trust and confidence in each other. And I said, that's amazing. This would happen to be a public project. And I said, what's interesting is to me is that the words trust and confidence are not in any contract documents that I've ever read, right? So the key parts of this relationship surpass the need for a contract. You still have a contract and you still have relationships that need to be protected, but it really is a pretty amazing process. Fewer surprises, fewer oops, fewer change orders. It is certainly in our experience that way. And frankly, we think it's better value and better building for the church client. Al threw a number out early on. GuernseyTingle's numbers, we've probably done 35 to 40 church projects in the last 20 years. Easily 90% of those projects for us have gone through this method or version of it. So we're going to stop there. We're already into break time, Emmanuel. I'm sorry, but we did not take them to Canada. But questions, comments? We've got folks in the room that actually do this for a living, so I'm sure we're going to have a few. few comments and questions. Yes, sir.
Is there a size of the project that will determine which method to use? A small project?
Well, a good question. I would say a very small project, again, design, bid, build, you might find that you have a relationship with a contractor already and an architect. You know, there's nothing wrong with kind of saying, hey, Mr. Architect, Mr. Contractor, you all worked together for years. Let's put together a proposal that makes sense for the church. We've done CMaR projects down to a few $100,000.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think that, my personal opinion is no project is too small practically to engage that three-party team early on, right? Construction does not manage itself. Again, things don't want to go down, they want to go up. So having that construction manager there, if it's a several $100,000 project or multi-million-dollar project, that level of expertise, I think, is important for success.
Julie?
Is there an off-ramp for the architect?
No, there's never an off-ramp. Generally, your contract with the architect should be a pay-as-you-go. That is, an architect that says, I want 25% up front, 25, that doesn't make any sense for the church. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the architect. So, again, as I said, the first contract should be for master planning and maybe some other services. There's no reason at all that you can't then incrementally push the contracts for the architect as the project develops. Because again, we're going to go through schematic design and then we'll help you bring these guys on or their comrades out there in the construction industry.
We're the only two. We're the only two that does this.
So nothing wrong with doing a schematic design contract and then incrementally push it along. But even if you had a contract for the architectural services all the way through what we call construction administration, helping with the contractor during construction, it's going to be billed to you on an incremental basis. So 5% in, 10% in, 80% in, you will know how much you've spent, and if it's not working, you can back off and say, we're going to stop the project. It is rare, like Al said, I can't remember that we've ever had to take an off-ramp, but it's not unusual. Unfortunately, it's not unusual that church projects don't go forward as expected. And, part of what you're going to hear later this morning is financing and fundraising. And if you can't raise the funds, then you either need to change the scope of the project significantly or say, we're not ready to do this project. We're going to push it off for a few years. Yes, sir.
Is there a process of finding a church that you like and you'd like to make a church like that to save some of the cost of the architecture? Because there's a lot of churches out there to choose from. But I know that there is a cost for getting those plans and things like that. But it seems like that would be a big cost savings to the church.
Unfortunately, buildings aren't like cars. So I can't find the model that I like that's got all the features and say, I want one of those, take it, go to Henry Ford and take one off the assembly line. That's an oversimplification to answer to your question. There may be some savings. And what it will do at a minimum is give you a good starting place of, hey, we like this, we think this works for us. But once you sit down with Brad or any other architect, they're going to start asking you questions about all of the, what does the worship team think? What does the education team think? What does the kitchen committee think? And it's a good starting point, but quite often, even though it looks like a church, a building that will satisfy your needs, it's going to be changed or tweaked or modified to really make it for your church needs. The other thing is, it's got to be site adapted to wherever your site is. It has to go through a process of code compliance. So if you went by Hickory Neck Episcopal Church that was done how many years ago? 20 years ago? And you love that space we still have to go back and make sure it's meeting the codes of today. So even if you came to us and asked that question. So yes, it has the potential to save you some dollars. I wouldn't say that it's a magnitude of, hey, we're going to cut the architectural fees and blah, blah, blah by 80 or 90%. That's just not the case. Yes, ma'am.
So to help or hopefully avoid over budgeting or trying to offset some of the costs, who are some specialty consultants that the architect and or the church should consider to be brought on early on in the design discussion and the design process?
A contractor. That's the best way to avoid cost overruns. And then, maybe Jeremy, I think you said it in terms of the bringing in specialty subcontractors during design that helps that process.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the whole process that we try to work through, but some of the soft costs as a church that you might come in contact with is your FF&E, we call it, was furniture, fixtures, equipment. So sometimes that can have a significant cost if you're building a new space out. If you have another high cost area is kitchens, like if you want to have a true commercial kitchen and serve your community in a certain way, that can bring its own consultant. Another big one is audio visual for your worship space. That's another one that we find you want to really have a specialty consultant. Sometimes that can be run through the architect or somebody you may have a different, a direct relationship with, but it's still a significant cost that might fall outside of our purview.
But even if it's outside of our purview, we want to make sure that we're tracking that cost, because it's not just the construction cost and the architectural fees, it's the total project cost that you need to manage. So absolutely, good suggestions, good question. I want to respect everybody's time, and Emmanuel's about
Yeah, one more.
cut us right off.
This gentleman right here has his hand up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there was a mention of the risk involved with construction and development. Can you touch on builders' risk coverage and pros and cons of the contractor carrying the coverage versus the church adding that expense?
Pretty simple. Sometimes the church can add on builder's risk to their normal property insurance that you currently carry, especially if it's an addition or expansion. And you will save some dollars in that, potentially in premiums. The flip side of that is these guys do builder's risk insurance all the time. They have relationships with their own insurance carriers, so they might be able to actually competitively get a policy out there that is a little less expensive, especially for new builds, new construction, because the church is not going to already have insurance on a new facility. The only thing to keep in mind, and it doesn't happen very often, is whoever has the policy will also carry the deductible. So if the church has the policy and there's a loss on the job site, theft, fire, whatever,
Yes,
the church is on the hook for that deductible as opposed to the contractor. The contractor carries the builder's risk, and the deductible is then that risk is carried fully by the general contractor.
And that's
Am I saying that
often,
right?
well, that's oftentimes a contractual negotiation, right? That's something that's often worked out in the beginning with the contract, right? Who actually pays for that deductible? But I agree with everything Tom said.
And that's the kind of question that comes up in CMaR early in the process. And if the contractor's not asking the design and church team that, then they're not thinking ahead. So it's a great question.